I first decided that I was going to make another album whilst I was living in London and feeling pretty uninspired by my hometown. I had been there my whole life, and I longed for a change, something new, something exciting. I felt like I was stuck in my job and not really going anywhere with my music, no matter how hard I tried. I knew I had enough songs for an album, and so I decided that this would be my focus, but this time I would take it somewhere else. The place I chose was Berlin, somewhere I'd visited a few times on tour before, and I'd always loved the energy and the atmosphere of the city. I knew that I was on a limited budget, but I had the tools at home to create most of the record myself, so I began the process of pre-production and started to map out what I wanted these songs to sound like. I went through all my demos and slowly started putting the songs that I thought were good enough into a top 10. Once I had decided the order of these tracks and was happy with the flow of the record, I began working on the demos until they were fully formed, using drum machines and experimenting with different sounds until I'd found the mood that would best represent the concept of Blood Street. My next step was to decide who I thought would be the best musicians to bring this album to life. My first step was to find a drummer. I knew that once I had the drums down, I could re-record everything over that. I just needed the backbone of the songs. I was recommended an amazing musician called Reeves by a friend of mine whose musical opinion I hold in high regard. It seemed to be a perfect fit. I met with Alex for 2 days in his studio in northeast London. We did 4 songs a day and it was so much fun. We messed about for ages trying to find the right sounds, hitting old snare drums and using smashed up cymbals. We eventually designed a kit that would help me get that old breakbeat sound, but also something that had a lot of warmth running through it. It was an amazing experience to see these songs being transformed by someone so emotionally invested in their craft. The drum machine loops were no more, and I was ready to record the rest of the album. Once we had finished all the drums, I took the stems back to my little home studio and began re-recording all the rhythm and lead guitar parts, adding sounds and textures with the limited analog equipment I had. I then laid down all my lead vocals and worked out the harmonies for each song. The next step was to find the right singers. I've always loved the female voice and found it incredibly moving. The first singer I chose was my great friend Sarah Goodson. Sarah has an amazingly beautiful and haunting voice, and we've written and sang together many times. She came round to my flat one day and sang all of the vocals for the entire album in one afternoon. I wanted to have 2-part harmonies running throughout the record, and I was particularly inspired by the vocals of my favourite album of all time, Neil Young's Unplugged. I was also looking for someone with a high vocal range. A few years ago I had split with my label and was feeling pretty lost about what to do, but I managed to get a last-minute gig in Manchester doing a solo show in a small pub. The gig itself wasn't the best, as there were a lot of technical issues, and my set was cut short. I was feeling a bit down, but this amazing young girl called Amber said she loved my voice and that her band were playing later, and asked me if I would stay and watch. They came on stage, and Amber's voice blew me away. The kind of voice that makes you stop what you're doing the moment she opens her mouth. I knew that one day I had to get her to sing on one of my records. When the time was right, she kindly agreed to hop on a train down to London and sing all my new songs. Her voice and Sarah's blended so beautifully and can be heard throughout the whole of the record. Once I had recorded everything I could myself, I headed off to see my old friend and longtime collaborator, John Davies. John has been with me from the very beginning and recorded and produced my first EP, Shut Us Down. We met at his studio down the road and began working on the bass guitar. John is multi-talented and can do a whole host of things. The kind of annoyingly brilliant person that can pick up any instrument and play it. Once the bass was done, we began the mixing and mastering process, and eventually I had the finished album in my hands. A week later I headed off to start my new life in Berlin. Once in Berlin, I worked remotely with my good friend and artist Lucas Mateen Carmel, who I had met whilst working in a cafe in London. For me, Blood Street represented how I felt about living there, trying to hold on to the city I loved, but struggling to maintain a decent quality of life due to the surge in rent prices and everyday living becoming more and more expensive. I'd always loved the artwork from the Bob Dylan album, Oh Mercy. For me, the couple dancing portrayed a sense of freedom, as if they have been liberated from the struggles of life, even if only for a moment. At the time, I was also becoming increasingly obsessed with the Martin Scorsese film, Taxi Driver. I loved the romance within the chaotic scenes of New York at night, and I decided to combine the freedom of Dylan's dancers with the chaos of the city in the background. I wanted to create a sense of hope, the feeling of hanging on. When I returned to London in the winter, I met with my friend and musician Serafina Simone, who had kindly agreed to be my dance partner. We wandered around empty streets, dancing aimlessly in front of a series of old buildings, which he would later merge into a collage and set the scene for the imaginary world of Blood Street. The album was now fully formed, and I was ready to release the first two singles, Slip of the Heart and When I Needed Her the Most. The album was set for release on the 4th of October 2019, and after finding some amazing musicians in Berlin, the Blood Street Band was formed. I felt so lucky to have found such kind and talented people who were willing to invest their time and effort into helping me bring the sound of Blood Street to the stage. We headed out on my first ever headline tour, which finished in Berlin in front of a surprisingly large audience. I couldn't believe how many people had shown up to hear us play, and it was an amazing feeling to be able to share these songs with so many new faces in the crowd. I've always found the process of releasing new music to be a rather strange experience. Suddenly that thing that you've held so close for so long is no longer entirely yours. Almost like a child leaving home for the first time. I'm slowly learning to ignore the weight of expectation, to let the songs find their own way, and to welcome those who may have found themselves on the Blood Street path.
Your own blood.